Jonathan Hayashi.
All right.
You were the first person to be on our program in 2018, by the way.
That's right.
Did you know that?
Oh,
You
yeah.
were the very first.
My goodness. It's been a year?
Over
and a half.
Year and a half.
It's
Yeah.
incredible.
All hail the power of Jesus' name, let angels prostrate fall, bring forth the royal diadem.
Yeah, so I just returned, in fact, last week from Japan. We took our church on a mission trip to Japan, and we had like our first Ordinary Radicals Discipleship Conference. And it was really surrounded by the book, and right now the book is getting translated from English to Japanese and trying to have that available and then Lord willing next year, 2020 we're going to have kind of the updated version of Ordinary Radicals with study notes at the end.
Nice.
So that's coming soon, Lord willing, there was a great momentum and people just really encouraged by that. But I think one of the biggest encouragement that people gave feedback was that discipleship was not a program we launched, but a lifestyle we embrace. So it's so much more than just some kind of system or strategy or structure that you implement, but it's really the heart of the gospel of understanding, starting from really, like we're talking about apologetics, we're talking about theology, how the theology ties into the practicality of the methodology within, in our ministry and our day-to-day life. So that, I think that's been really encouraging. That's something that we wanted to capture what Ordinary Radicals meant for us, a return to a Christ-centered discipleship. So I think it's been a great feedback, and I'm just really encouraged to hear, just really humbled and honored that people took the time to read it and implement it within their churches and their small groups and so forth. A lot of people on the mission trip, in fact, they're not deacons, they're not pastors or elders, they were lay people. So one of the sessions I was teaching was discipleship is a call for all, no excuse, no exception.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we talk about is that we talk about discipleship is done by the ordained clergies, right? Like people who have gone through seminary to Greek and Hebrew and so forth. And then there's the lay people, right? What do lay people do? They lay around the church. But what's encouraging is that a lot of the people who led the breakout sessions or teaching were actually our lay people. And I truly believe that if God's going to move or society or community or nation, it needs to be done by ordinary men and women who are taking a radical stance for the gospel and the radical measure of looking into the scripture, looking to Christ, who's the author and perfecter of our faith, and then taking up and starting within their homes, starting in their families, and then now in the church, in radical measures, what it means the gospel to saturate every aspect of their lives, not just a simple gospel presentation, but a gospel conversation which begins really this world revolution within their homes, their churches, and their community. So we've seen that slow movement of people really believing and embracing the gospel and wanting to live it out on a day-to-day basis. So that's been really exciting. I mean, again, like I'm really an ordinary person too. People say, well, you're getting a doctorate, but really I'm an ordinary person as well. But really begin to live and embrace that.
How does discipleship work hand in hand with apologetics? Or do they?
Yeah, I do think so, because I think discipleship, again, by definition, I think sometimes we overcomplicate it and we make it very unapproachable. And that's the reason we say it's only the ordained clergy, right? So what happens is that we have a bunch of people, we have passive spectators rather than active co-laborers in the mission and the message of the gospel of Jesus. So what happens is that people begin to see this gospel as a consumer mentality into something that not to be embraced and lived, right? So even apologetics, sometimes we think apologetics is just a bunch of these people just full head of knowledge and they're just communicating and just saying it. But actually, as apologists or just apologetics and people just embracing the gospel, we know it's so much more than head knowledge, don't we? Right? And I think one of the biggest misunderstandings about discipleship is information. right?
Yeah.
So, but discipleship without application actually leads to frustration. But a true understanding of discipleship with application leads to transformation, right? If we as apologists miss that point, we're nothing different from the Pharisees, right? If we just look in the times of Christ, who were the people who knew it all and who knew about doctrine in a sense? The Pharisees. But they missed it big time because they were not applying and living it within their lives. And I think sometimes I'm just afraid if Jesus were to return to the 21st century to our churches, and he will look at our churches and what he would say. Well done, good and faithful servants. Oh, you Pharisees, right? And I'm sure y'all churches don't have that problem. But so again, I do think the issue again, discipleship, sometimes we think, oh, it's just within the classroom we teach a bunch of information. But that's the reason I think we see where we fail. Theory never ties into practice, right? Or the classroom never reaches to the living room. Or theology never ties into their methodology. This is part of my doctoral dissertation that it just got approved and I'm implementing within my church right now, is that or belief always ties into our behavior. Or perception always ties into our practice. And there's not a dichotomized mentality of just this cognition doesn't warm our affection that ties into our volition, right? That's kind of Matthew 4:19. Therefore, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. So again, apologetics, theology, and everything, and doctrine, and the Bible ties in everything within our life. And so I'm really excited about this part of the doctoral dissertation that I just finished writing with Southern Seminary, because I think Ordinary Radicals was more so my master's thesis. From if you have a leadership problem, you have a discipleship problem. If you have a discipleship problem, you have a leadership problem. My doctoral dissertation is really understanding holistically what a person is through kind of like a biblical counseling perspective, and talking about your cognition, your affection, and your volition, everything ties in together. And then what does that mean? And expand on that as we faithfully counsel people with the whole counsel of God's Word. So I know I kind of rabbit trail, but answer your question, apologetics and discipleship actually kind of both ties in together.
Right.
Yeah. I think about Martin Luther said, one book is enough, yet 1,000 books is not too many, right? And I think us apologists, we love books. We love reading a lot of material. I was kind of recently in an interview as well. But, first of all, it needs to start with the scripture, right? I tell people like, hey, I want to buy your book so I can kind of grow and become an ordinary radical. I was like, okay, well, that's a supplemental. Please, I'm really excited that you want to read my book and, read it. But it's really, really based out of the scripture. We're just a return to a Christ-centered discipleship. That's kind of what the reformers did, right? It was like people talk about the Protestant Reformation. I was like, well, that's incredible, this new idea. Well, no, actually, we were forming back what the scripture intended to say, right? Reform. And I'm just convinced more and more as I grow in my faith, as I'm leading the congregation, and shepherding and so forth, that we just have a lack of scripture, just people just not reading, and they're not praying the means of grace that God has given us, the communion of the saints and church discipline and scripture reading. I think like Spurgeon, the Prince of Preacher, 19th century. Somebody asked him, was like, hey, which one's more important, Bible reading or prayer? Which one's more important? And Spurgeon said, which one's more important, breathing in or breathing out, right? And that it's basic, as simple as that. So first of all, I would say, if you want to learn to do apologetics, begin with the scripture, begin to read it, and then God's going to embrace your love for His Word and love for His church and love for the world, and that will be an ebb and flow of evangelism, and naturally the evangelism, it's kind of like a two-sword, evangelism and apologetics kind of ties in together as a whole.